Hi everyone, it's Jay here, and today I'm going to review the manga and manhwa I read in April. I read 15 volumes, I started 2 new series, new for me anyway, and the rest are a continuation of series I have already begun. Let's start with The Remarried Empress, Volume 9. This is a manhwa that follows Navier, an empress whose husband Sovieshu one day brings home a pregnant mistress, Rashta. This was a big deal because Navier and Sovieshu had been friends since they were children, and they were seen as the perfect couple. The emperor and empress power couple. Needless to say, their relationship and marriage deteriorates. If you don't want some spoilers, please skip ahead because it's going to be hard not to reveal anything, but if you have read the blurb for this volume on the back, I won't be mentioning anything beyond that. Okay, ready for my review? So Navier is getting married in this one, which you can obviously see on the front cover, which I do not understand why her expression was drawn like this. Who looked at this and okayed it for print? Her head is pushed forward, which Navier never does, as she maintains a regal posture at all times, and her face? There are some questionable expressions sometimes throughout this series, and whilst I applaud pushing yourself as an artist, trying to draw things from different angles, if it doesn't work, don't stick it on the front cover. Every time I see this, I cringe. I sound really mean, and I'm trying not to be, I'm just trying to be honest. But moving on to the story, we're seeing Navier get happier and happier, while Sovieshu gets more and more miserable. Rashta is a disaster of a wife, making more and more mistakes. She does something in this that is so unforgivable, for me at least. She becomes irredeemable. I mean, she wasn't great anyway, but her actions here, wow. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens to her further down the line. And Duke Kaufman appears in this one, the guy who drank the love potion, and sheesh, you think you know someone. Overall, the volume had some great moments, and some tiresome parts, such as the building of alliances around Navier and the previous queen. It is very much tell, don't show, and I found it a bit boring, which is strange because usually I get really fired up in the politics of creating alliances in stories such as these. The ending was excellent and quite the cliffhanger. There is no release date for Volume 10, which is really sad. I want to know what happens. I read Dark Moon Blood Altar on Webtoons. You can get physical copies of the series, but I decided to binge read it on the Webtoons app, which I did for free. I had to watch a few ads, but I don't mind doing that. I didn't realise that this series was based on a K-pop band called Enhypen, and the storyline is centred around a bunch of their music videos. I found out after I read it, so there's a little fact for you. The series follows Suha, who starts at the Desilis Academy, and she chose this school because she hates vampires, and this school is famous for not having any, which is a bit of a joke because the 7 most popular boys in the school are vampires, and they just happen to befriend Suha. Suha seems to be a bit like catnip to the supernatural. Also, all the lessons happen at night, so if you wanted to go to a school that definitely didn't have any vampires, surely you would pick a daytime school, like Sunshine Academy, which is just down the road and has coincidentally a bunch of werewolves attending. I won't go into the big overarching storyline because I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but I will mention a few amusing points. There is a sport called Nightball, and the 7 vampires are of course the stars of the team. And when you read it, how do you not read it and think, wow, they have supernatural strength? You definitely have to suspend your disbelief, but that's okay. A quick eye roll and then you carry on reading. I much preferred the first 3 to 4 volumes of the series. The story's set in the school, and I enjoyed the characters getting to know one another, the friendships and potential relationships building. But then Suha gets taken, and the boys spend the rest of the series getting her back. And whilst there are some really good moments, and the backstories and history are cool, it just drags on for too long. It's hurdle after hurdle, and I really just wanted her to be saved so the story could go back to the school setting. This is just my opinion, and I don't want anyone to not read it because I said that. I'm glad I read it, but I won't be picking up the physical volumes. I read Volume 3 of Hate Me But Let Me Stay. I found this volume to be a really enjoyable read. Hazuki and Naoto's relationship is in a pretty good place now, which means it's the perfect time to introduce two guys who are also an alpha and omega. But their relationship seems to be a non-starter, and so it's interesting watching Hazuki and Naruto try and help them, with a few misunderstandings thrown in along the way. It did a really good job of allowing them to reflect on how their past and how their relationship has changed over time. For me, the best storyline involved Shizuku, their daughter. She's going to find out whether she's an alpha, beta or omega, and it's causing her a lot of anxiety. This series goes from strength to strength, and this volume had some really beautiful moments between Shizuku and her family. I'm looking forward to volume 4, which is out in July. I read another BL called Semantic Error. This is a manhwa that follows Sangwoo, a university student who was brutally honest with his professor about who did and didn't contribute to a group project. This resulted in another student called Jae-young to fail his class and being unable to graduate and go abroad. As I said in a previous review, I wasn't a fan of Jae-young at all in the first one. I mean, you reap what you sow. If you don't help out, brace yourself for the consequences. But then he went out to deliberately upset Sangwoo's life, with what could be considered small and inconsequential things to some people, but Sangwoo is clearly on the spectrum, and so it ended up disrupting his schedule and life. But then their relationship and how they react to each other slowly begins to change. Jae-young's behaviour becomes almost normal to Sangwoo, and so when he backs off, Sangwoo is left in the lurch again, having to adapt again. And Sangwoo realises he wants Jae-young back in his life. Cue a rather large amount of cuteness, hilarity, and some pretty serious hurdles to anything that would romantically happen between them. Sangwoo has issues with homosexuality, and I think this and his confusion over his feelings is going to be explored in the next volume. I really enjoyed this volume. I thought Jae-young was much nicer in this volume. For the most part, he asks permission to touch Sangwoo, and they are learning more about each other. Volume 3 is out in July, and I cannot wait. Dragon Knight's Beloved. It's an enjoyable series. The stakes don't feel that high, so it's a great read for when you just want to relax. The story is set in a world where dragons exist, and Melissa is loved by the dragons. She's a maid in the castle, and she goes out to feed them snacks along with other duties. Her friend Hubert is a commander of the Dragon Knights and gets on very well with Melissa. One day, Hubert has to leave the Dragon Knights to take over as head of his family due to his brother dying, so he and his dragon, White Queen, are all set to leave. But when he finds out Melissa was also planning to leave the castle to gain maid experience elsewhere, he asks her to pretend to be his lover. Apparently, his dead brother's fiancée is all over him, wanting to now marry Hubert, which is a complete no-go because White Queen hates her, and the story goes from there. I thought the first volume set up the story really well, and there's a ranking system amongst dragons that is quite interesting too. Speaking of the dragons, the design is interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about them. They look too mechanical, so much so that at one point I thought they were covered in armour. I love their design on the front covers, but I think it's because it's in colour and there aren't black lines creating the detail. It's shades of colours giving it depth. Does that make sense? It's a softer look at all the detail. Also, and this may sound bad, but some of the knights seem to have the same haircut as Hubert. And at one point I was confused between who was speaking. And on one of the pages, okay, look at this. What manga does this remind you of? I was having Berserk flashbacks, which was very jarring when I was reading this series. Anyway, Volume 4 ends on quite an interesting event that could have serious repercussions for the kingdom, so I'm looking forward to reading more. There are 8 volumes currently out, with number 9 coming out in September. Last but certainly not least, I read Volume 8 of A Business Proposal. The cover gives away what happens in this one, so that's the plotline. The grandfather gets meddlesome in this one, there's a scandal at work which they have to deal with, and Haru's dad is not happy with her wanting to marry Teimu. I always find this series enjoyable, and I laughed quite a bit in this one. The suit scene, that's all I'm going to say. This was a fun volume, lots happened, and the end was a bit spicier than I was expecting, but not that spicy, because it's rated older teen. Volume 9 is out on the 20th of May. So those are the volumes I read in April 2025. I'm glad I finally started reading The Dragon Knight's Beloved, and the manhwas were all great reads, which is a relief because they are more expensive than a manga volume. Check out sci-fi.com because they always reduce the RRP on manga and manhwa, and if you use the code JaysManga you'll get an extra 5% off. Let me know what you've read recently. Do you have any recommendations for me? Please like and subscribe and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Happy reading everyone. Bye!